Welcome everybody, and in this lecture we'll discuss about section 54D. What is the section number? Section 54D. Now it talks about the land and building that is compulsorily acquired by the government, obviously, whether it is state government, whether it is central government, but land and building compulsorily acquired, and that land and building was actually used for industrial purpose. So it talks about 54D talks about compulsory acquisition of land and building by government which was actually used for industrial purpose. Now if a businessman is running some factory and government compulsorily acquires that building, what that businessman will do? He'll start this factory at some other place, correct? Now, if that businessman starts the factory at some other place, government says we are ready to give exemption under 54D. Now, how all this works, we'll understand in this section. To whom this is applicable? Is it applicable to individual HUF or to all the SSE? The answer is it is applicable to all SSE. Whether it is individual, HUF, company, partnership, LLP, local authority, any type of SSE is okay for everybody. Whoever satisfies the conditions, for them this section applies. So applicable to all SSEs, this you should remember. Now what happened? Land and building on which industrial activity was conducted, industrial purpose it was used for, or any right in such industrial undertaking was taken over by government, was compulsorily acquired by the government, Now that industrial undertaking may be a short-term capital asset or a long-term capital asset. Doesn't matter whether it is short-term, whether it is long-term, doesn't matter. Did government acquire the industrial undertakings, land, building? If yes, you are eligible for the exemption. Whether it is long-term capital asset, short-term capital asset, individual or company, doesn't matter at all. Clear to all of you? Very good. Now, that industrial undertaking must be actually conducting its activities at least for 2 years immediately before the acquisition by government. At least 2 years industrial activity should be conducted. Some production, some manufacture should be conducted at least for how many years? 2 years. If suppose that industrial activity happened only for less than 2 years, then can you get the exemption under 54D? The answer is no. So if you want to enjoy the exemption under 54D, the best case would be that at least for 2 years it was run as an industrial undertaking. Now sir, actually my family, my HUF was to run the industrial undertaking, then partition happened, I got the industrial undertaking, so I run only for 6 months, but my HUF run that industrial undertaking for 10 years. So no problem yaar, why you are worrying, right? The period before partition and after partition both are covered. The period where the industrial undertaking was run by HUF and by the individual, both will be considered for deciding whether it was used for 2 years or more than 2 years or less than 2 years. Because 2 years or more you will get exemption, less than 2 years you will not get exemption. Same way, you did industrial undertaking related activities as a tenant, not as an owner of the building, as a tenant. Later on you purchased the industrial undertaking, the building, the land you purchased. Now after purchase you continued only for 6 months, government took. क्या करेंगे यार किस्मत, right? So as a tenant how much period you used? As a owner how much period you used? Both these things together we should check. If it is more than 2 years, then you get the exemption under 54D. Less than 2 years, no exemption, right? So whatever I said till now, are you clear about? I hope yes. So what I said, hey, to whom this section applies? To all the assessees. What is acquired by the government? Land, building which was used for industrial purpose, or any right in such industrial undertaking. The capital asset may be long term or short term, but it must be used for industrial undertaking purpose at least for 2 years. If it is the case of HUF partition, the period held by HUF, the period which was held by the individual after partition, both are covered. If it is a tenant acquiring the industrial undertaking, then government acquiring, then the tenancy period for industrial undertaking and ownership period of the assessee for industrial undertaking, both will be checked together and seen. If it is more than 2 years, then you are eligible for exemption under 54D. And we understood till now these many things. Now new industrial undertaking should be constructed or acquired, because if you sell to government or government compulsorily acquired, now after compulsory acquisition, if you just keep idle, you will get money from government. It's not enough, you will not get exemption under 54D. You should acquire another industrial undertaking, or you should construct a new industrial undertaking, that too within 3 years only. The day when government acquired, from that day within 3 years. But the problem with government is that government don't pay the money on time. So that's why we should remember that the period of 3 years starts from the day when you get money from government. Starts from the day when you get money from government. So you got the money from government from on this day, from this date within 3 years. Did you purchase or construct a new industrial undertaking? If the answer is yes, then you are going to get the exemption. The question is how much? The answer is minimum of the two. What are the two things? One is your capital gain, right? And second one, amount invested in new industrial undertaking. Your capital gain or amount invested in new industrial undertaking. Now why I used capital gain? Because it can be either short term or long term. Okay. So what is the deduction under 54D? Minimum of the two. First one capital gain, second one amount invested in new asset. That's it. Now I'll tell you that if you sell this new industrial undertaking within 3 years, then the deduction, just I said na, whichever is lower you will get the deduction. That deduction will be taxable, and it is not directly taxed. It is taxed by reducing it from the cost of acquisition of new industrial undertaking. You did not understand, right? No problem, I'll tell you. Hey, I said the new industrial undertaking at least for 3 years you should not sell. I said up to 3 years new undertaking you should not sell. If you don't sell the new industrial undertaking up to 3 years, then no problem at all. If you sell after 3 years, then whatever the sale consideration of new industrial undertaking minus cost you will do, and you will get the capital gain, right? If it is long term, you will also do indexation, nothing wrong in it. But suppose if you sell within 3 years, then obviously capital gain is computed, right? So they will calculate sale consideration of new undertaking minus transfer expenses, then you get net consideration, then you have to reduce the cost, right? That cost will not be total cost reduced. That cost minus the 54D exemption which you claimed earlier, right? That cost you will write in the inner column, and from that you will do deduction of 54D exemption, and whatever is the net result, right? Your cost minus 54D exemption, balance will be taxable, right? Oh, sorry. That balance will be treated as the cost, and that cost will be reduced from the sale consideration to compute capital gains. I'll tell you again. We'll take the sale consideration normally. From that, we'll deduct transfer expenses. We'll get net sale consideration. Generally, we deduct the cost or indexed cost, correct? But if the new asset is sold within 3 years, we'll not deduct the cost or indexed cost directly. But first, from this cost or indexed cost, we will reduce the exemption 54D deduction, and the balance cost only will deduct from the sale consideration, and capital gain will be calculated. Now, if suppose, because capital gain account scheme is also there, you deposited the money in capital gain account scheme, and up to 3 years you did not use the money, then whatever money kept in the capital gain account scheme, that will become taxable. That will become taxable. This way we should understand the topic. Now, when you do numerical problem, please understand we are talking about industrial undertaking, right? So if it is a depreciable asset, the capital gain will be computed like opening WDV, add purchases, minus sales, right? This pattern. If it is non-depreciable asset, then normally we will calculate. Okay, very good.